Thank you for joining with me for the meditation of Lesson 49. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. It is quite possible to listen to God's voice all through the day without interrupting your regular activities in any way. The part of your mind in which truth abides is in constant communication with God, whether you are aware of it or not. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. Sit with your back supported, head and neck free. The part that is listening to the voice for God, the part of you that is listening to the voice of God is calm, always at rest and wholly certain. It is really the only part there is. The other part is a wild illusion, frantic and distraught, but without reality of any kind. Try not to listen to it. Try to identify with the part of your mind where stillness and peace reign forever. Listen to God's voice call to you lovingly, reminding you that your Creator has not forgotten His Son. At least 4 or 5 minute practice periods today. We will try to hear God's voice, reminding us of Him and of ourself, capital S. Let us approach this happy and holy of thoughts with confidence, knowing that in doing so we are joining our will with the will of God. He wants you to hear His voice. He gave it to you to be heard. We will listen in deep silence. We will be very still and open our minds. We will go past all the shrieks and sick imaginings that cover our real thoughts and obscure our eternal link with God. Let us sink deep into the peace that waits for us beyond this frantic world and our frantic thoughts. We do not live here. We will reach our real home. We will reach the place where we are truly welcome. We will reach God. Now let's close our eyes if they're not closed already and sit in silence and allow God's voice to speak to us. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. And this is Ken Wapnick's commentary. This is a lesson from which many students of A Course in Miracles have derived a great deal of mileage, unfortunately going the wrong way, to hell rather than heaven. They often take this lesson to mean that they hear the Holy Spirit tell them wonderful things all the time. If we follow the thinking in these lessons, however, it is obvious that we cannot hear God's voice all through the day because our minds are in constant clutter. Sorry, I like that word. Jesus already has explained the clutter's presence, our resistance to losing our individual and special identity. This resistance is reflected in cherishing the ego's voice of specialness in order to prevent our hearing the voice of the Holy Spirit. While it is therefore true that God's voice speaks to us through the day because the Holy Spirit is in our minds, this does not mean that we hear it. Pay careful attention to the lesson's words. Jesus does not say we hear God's voice all through the day, but that God's voice speaks to us all through the day. We are not going to listen because, again, of our resistance to losing our identity, expressed through the investment in perpetuating our specialness. That is why it is so important to read this and all passages in A Course in Miracles very carefully. Another important part that speaks to the heart of Course students becoming confused is that we are always listening to an inner voice. We cannot listen to anything else. Our bodies are the vehicles or channels through which either the voices of the ego or the Holy Spirit speak. Students often think that just because they hear an inner voice, it must be the Holy Spirit. They unfortunately have totally forgotten about the other voice, which was specifically and intentionally made to drown out the still small voice of the Holy Spirit. That is why Jesus emphasizes helping us remove our investment in the ego so we could inevitably and naturally hear the voice that speaks for truth. My wife, Gloria, has made a similar point when she would remind students that hearing an inner voice they believe belongs to an entity on the other side does not necessarily mean that entity is more advanced or ego-free than they. In the end, discernment is a prime prerequisite for any spiritual seeker, no less for students of A Course in Miracles who need to discern the difference between the two voices. Opening our minds means that our decision maker chooses the Holy Spirit's forgiveness instead of ego's attack. In order to reach God, we have to set aside our identification with the ego's voice of specialness, and it is the workbook's aim to help us reach God through this process. Do not forget to repeat today's idea very frequently. Do so with your eyes open when necessary, but closed when possible. And be sure to sit quiet and repeat the idea for today whenever you can, closing your eyes on the world and realizing you are inviting God's voice to speak to you. Jesus returns to emphasis on doing the lessons with either eyes open or closed, although his current preference in our training is our eyes shut, maximizing the experience that is our thoughts that need correction. That it is our thoughts that need the correction. As we have repeatedly seen in recent lessons, we are urged to apply the idea for the day as often as we can remember, very frequently, whenever you can. In this way, we reinforce our learning that it is the Holy Spirit's wisdom and love we truly want, found in our minds, not in the world. Lesson 49, God's voice speaks to me all through the day. I love you. Thank you so much for joining with me, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a beautiful day.